What's up, YouTube? I've been sitting on this interview for a little while. I got a chance to talk to the great Jason Marshall, amazing baritone saxophonist as well as tenor saxophonist. He used to play with his organ trio at the American Legion. I believe it was every Wednesday night. The way I heard about that gig was John Ledbetter was also part of Jason Marshall's organ group, and they would just be playing a lot of standards pretty much every Wednesday and having the most epic saxophone battles. So a couple of times I got to join them for those, and it was just a blast. As the years went on, I got to know Jason more, and he asked me to play one night with his big band, which was very memorable for me. Jason would handpick the best musicians he could find in this big band. The entire night was just filled with some really great playing as well as some amazing soloing. A band leader in his own right, he has 3 albums out. The most recent one is called New Beginnings, and it was recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's studio. We talk a bit about this in the interview. When you listen to the sound quality of this album, you realize why so many people over the years wanted to record there. On top of all that, there's just amazing playing throughout the album, so definitely go and check this one out. It was just so great to sit down with him about all the things that he loves as a saxophone player and why he was drawn to the calling of being a musician in the first place. Let's jump to the interview. Here's Jason Marshall. I really appreciate you doing this, man. It means
Thank you
a
for
lot.
asking. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, man. So let's get into it. What was your first, light bulb moment with the art of improvisation and playing? Because, like we all pick up our instruments and we start, playing them. Usually cats are reading music first. When did you realize, that, number one, that this is like super fun to do? And number two, this was something that you were really, really interested in making a part of your life? Or was there a light bulb moment, or was it more of a gradual thing?
Yeah. So I grew up around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing Dexter Gordon on Webster. Remember that
Oh.
TV show?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I remember seeing Jimmy Heath on the Cosby Show,
Mm-hmm.
Diz Gillespie and Tito Puente and Joe Williams and I mean Nancy Wilson and seeing musicians on Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and
Yeah.
just that was around.
Yeah.
So I knew that there were levels to chopsticks on the piano, hot cross buns on the recorder, whatever. And hearing other really strong musicians, I'm like, okay, well, I know they can do stuff I can't do. So whatever that is, I want to get to that. My mother's my first musical influence. She sang to me every day. I mean, when I say every day, she sang to me every day until I left for college. So 18 years of that.
That's
And
beautiful, man.
you know what I mean? That informs just how I hear the world, right? Never
Mm-hmm.
mind music. I hear everything relative to her singing voice. So that's my first thing. When we were the last people to get cable, but when we finally got cable and there was a jazz station, it was called Bet on Jazz on the BET network.
Mm-hmm.
They had the Soupy Sales recording of Clifford Brown. That was like one of the only recordings I've ever seen of him. But to hear him play bebop, that was it. Like I was like, whatever that is, I want to do that. That
Yeah.
kind of clarity, And then my parents worked in media advocacy, and so we would get a lot of CDs and cassettes and records and things through the house. So I remember an Impulse collection called Can You Dig It? And it was just like a jazz kind of starter CD. It had a Mingus song on it. On the record, on that one, it was called 2BS. We might know it as Haitian Fight Song.
Okay.
So I heard that, and it was Booker Irvin on tenor.
Yeah.
And I don't know why then that it struck me. But there was something very familiar about the sound he got out of the tenor to me. So I was like, I want to pursue that. That was another moment. And also on that one was there was a Sonny Rollins song. I can't remember the name of it. And then there was one with Stanley Turrentine with Shirley Scott. And that was a real influential one on me too. So I think I would kind of zero in on those experiences, and certainly that recording on Impulse.
Sure. Yeah, those are super heavy. And those are all like around a similar time period for you, like in high school
Yeah,
or
yeah. High school, not so much, but certainly ninth, 10th grade, in there.
Mhm.
Like, and also that was the beginning of when you could use the internet for music research. So I remember my high school band director in ninth or 10th grade printing out a page from Jazz Corner, and it had Ronnie Cuber's face on it.
Oh
And he was
yeah.
like, Ronnie Cuber's the guy. And that's first I had ever heard of Ronnie, and then my school situation was mostly people supporting me and getting out of my way because I was so self-motivated even by then. I just wanted to get to the thing. So, you know,
That checks out, man. I mean, when you play, it sounds so natural. Like I don't even hear the instrument half the time. I just
oh
because
man,
I
I
can hear
appreciate that.
like straight like thought going into
Mm.
sound. So that you were having those influences that early on just makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that's great.
So yeah, that was then. I mean, if I put it on one record, it would be that Impulse compilation.
Impulse cut. So the one with Booker Irving.
Yeah, but it was Mingus, it was Sonny Rollins, it was Stanley Turrentine for sure. And then actually I should also mention Cannonball Adderley, Something Else. Like
Hmm.
that was the first time I had heard a jazz record on purpose. Like, my saxophone teacher, he said, "You know about Something Else?" I said, "What do you mean? Do I know something else?" He
Yeah.
said, "Sit down." And he had nice stereo system in his studio. It was like my first lesson, and he put it on, and you hear the bass line, and then you like just to hear the way everything is sort of arrayed in the soundscape, and I was like, and then to hear it Cannonball sound, and Miles, but Cannonball,
Hmm.
man, that struck me.
And yeah, that whole arrangement of that tune too, it just had such a
Yeah,
vibe coming into it. You would never know that it's going to be Autumn Leaves that comes out of
right,
that,
right,
but
exactly,
that's so
exactly.
deep. And
Yeah.
I remember too that was a big one for me because I remember hearing his sound, and I was an alto player in high
Mm-hmm.
school, and the way he was playing, like I didn't think to do any research on it, but I just like, oh, that's a tenor because he's playing like low. He's like for a
Yeah,
good part of the
okay,
beginning of the solo,
sure,
and like in
sure.
a way that I had never heard the alto sound before. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's a big one.
yeah. I mean, for me, I always wanted to be able to create that kind of magic, like the magic that I felt hearing Something Else the first time.
Hmm.
It's almost like it's like you and great educators will talk about being able to put somebody in a time and space. And
Yes.
so it's as if you pick somebody up and you drop them into this environment where they're totally um sort of subject to what the environment decides, but it's in a good way.
Yeah.
So for me, that's always been an objective that I've had.
This is so heavy, man. I've thought about that a lot. Like some of my favorite recordings to listen to
Mm-hmm.
are things that make me just go somewhere else. Like just they have like this sound to them, and that you just go to this place. And
Right.
and I've never heard somebody explain it that clearly. That's a great talking point for sure. Killing, man. Well, that was number one. That was.
Okay.
What is one thing you've been focusing on in the practice room? Like more recently, I guess,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
everybody's, we're always at our own stages of stuff, but
yeah, for
it's
sure,
always
for sure.
evolving.
Yeah, I've been going back to develop myself on a technical level just to get better at playing the saxophone,
Hmm.
but still in a way that um increases, broadly speaking, increases my musical capacity. Like I want to be able to play more music. I don't necessarily want to just be able to play more saxophone, right? Because there's lots of examples of saxophones operated to technical exhaustion, right? Like we know what that sounds like. And for me, that's appealing to me as a student of the instrument, but I don't know anyone who's not a student of the instrument that finds that appealing. So I'm trying to, go into that mode of being a student of the instrument, but also be a steward of a disciple of the music, right? So just to raise the level of music to that place where you can just sort of create a whole new world of experience for the listener.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes, getting better. Yeah, for sure.
That's it, but it's great to make that distinction between why you're actually doing it. Who is the last saxophone player you listened to? Could be alive or deceased, and thought to yourself, "Damn, this is killing." And
Charles Lloyd.
Charles Lloyd.
Charles Lloyd. The Charles Lloyd is the last time it was Cape May. I was at the Cape May Festival with the Mingus Band, and Charles Lloyd played before us, and I cried listening to him. And it wasn't because I was amazed at his technical ability, but just there was a depth of his sound that just struck me. And okay, he's practiced a lot, but he's also lived a lot, and it was the lived experience that I was able to sort of sense when he played, and that was a deeply emotional experience for me. I've heard good and great musicians since then, but that was the one that really kind of hit me between the eyes.
And you said that was live at Cape May.
That was at Cape May over this past summer.
And that was his group,
that was quartet? His band, yeah, with Eric Harlan and Gerald Clayton and maybe Harish Raghavan on bass.
Awesome. Number 4 is what is your current saxophone setup?
So my setup is what it's been for a long time. I play a Jody Jazz DV number 10 mouthpiece with a Rico orange box, distributed by D'Addario now, but a Rico orange box number 4.
Ooh.
And I play a Ravner platinum ligature, and I play a P. Marriott low A baritone saxophone. In the early mid 2000s, I played almost exclusively low B flat horn, but as I got just sort of developed and grew into my own sound, the low A helped me speak a little more fluently.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I haven't messed with baritone a lot, but one thing I found just got a little funky, and I didn't pay attention to this at all before, but is that with the low A, doesn't that change your altissimo fingerings? Does that?
Well, so baritone, every model baritone got its own altissimo fingers. That's number one. Okay, so like a Mark 6 and a Series 2, they got different fingerings. I'm telling you because I know, right?
Yeah.
Yamaha got their own fingerings. 62 to 61, they got different fingerings.
Right.
A King Tempo, which is a Coward stencil, got different fingerings than a King Super 20. I've had both of those instruments. They're great. They're different. A P. Marriott got its own set of fingerings. I haven't tried it on the Cannonball baritone. Yanagisawa got different fingerings. Low A to B flat, I find somewhat less variation if it's the same model instrument.
Yeah.
But altissimo and baritone that's like a Fibonacci sequence,
Yeah, no, I hear that, and it didn't make me put the instrument down, but it didn't, just realizing how difficult that was going to be, it didn't get me excited.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a different thing. I will say on baritone, one of the things that makes it easier is if you sing the pitches, and because it's a baritone instrument, it's easier to sing altissimo pitches on the baritone.
Yeah, it's right in our range, right?
Correct. It's right kind of in the male falsetto range.
Hmm.
You can hit those notes, and that makes it easier. Um, but I will also offer that if you can unlock the altissimo and the baritone, you have way more saxophone than any of the other saxophones.
Yeah, you got all that bottom end that just doesn't exist.
Correct, correct. And from the low B flat, you have at least 5 octaves
Hmm.
that speak like notes, like not squeal, but like real notes.
Yeah.
You have 5 written B flats.
No, I love that. And that setup, man, that's a man's setup.
Oh
It's
man,
like,
look, I started experimenting with mouthpieces that were too open for me before I knew any better. Right,
hmm.
like I remember in high school, and I heard, okay, if you're gonna play jazz, you got to have a metal mouthpiece, right? And I had a playing on a Bundy, and I got my little money together, and I got my parents to take me to Washington Music Center, Chuck Levin's Washington Music Center,
Yep.
in Wheaton, Maryland. That's the store that supplies the military with all their instruments.
Oh,
Okay.
nice. So they
Yeah.
got a lot,
They
probably a
got a
lot of
lot of
variety.
correct.
Yeah.
So I just said, I need a metal mouthpiece. And the guy was like, well, what size do you want? I was like, I don't know. I just need a metal mouthpiece. And it was the only one they had was a Berg Larson. I remember it was a 105/2 for
Hmm.
alto.
Oh, for alto, yeah, because that's
For
like a tenor
alto.
opening. I was just like,
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. For alto.
that's huge. Yeah.
That's huge. But I didn't know any better.
Right.
So I just put on whatever reed I had. I couldn't get a sound out, and I experiment, experimented until I got a sound. But I think that set me on a particular trajectory in terms of what mouthpieces should feel like.
Hmm.
And then I experimented and generally proceeded in ignorance until I eventually I got a horn, and then I started studying with Gary Smulyan the summer between 10th and 11th grade, also Ronnie Cuber.
Mm.
And
Nice.
Gary put me on a link, and that began sort of the foundation for where I'm at now.
Gotcha.
But and that the link I got from Gary, it had been worked on and all of that. And then when I switched to the P Marriott, none of the mouthpieces that I had worked. And so I had met Jody at the IAJE show actually,
Hmm.
and he had something that worked, but I ignored it because I was playing all these custom mouthpieces and all of that. But Jody's stuff, it was just so consistent that it let me relax about what um what all else was going on musically. And so that's what I stuck with, and that's where I'm at now. And I got no mind to change it up. I mean, I played the first one I got from him, the first DV, which I actually played as a prototype. I got that one in like 05, 06. And I remember he called me. I was traveling, like I was, on the tarmac. Hey, I'm about to take off. What's going on? He's like, I got a DV prototype done. I said, I'm playing with Roy tonight. And
Oh, nice.
he said, can you stop by before the gig? Because at the time he lived in Lower Manhattan near where the gig was. So I
Hmm.
stopped by his place on the way to the gig, put the prototype on, played it, and I was like, well, you can't have this back until I can get another one.
Right.
And that's what it was.
Yeah, man.
That's what it
That's
was.
great. Yeah, when you know. One of the first tenor pieces I played that I really liked and that actually made me open up to the instrument was I don't know which Jody piece it was, like the like the beginner model, I guess, if they have
Okay.
one or whatever it's called.
Uh-huh.
But that thing, I put it on and it was just like a Van Doren Blue Box 2, and just the sound was just like it was
Yeah, right. Right.
like way more free blowing and way more open and stuff. It felt great to play.
The thing about Jody's stuff that I really like is that his stuff, he focuses on clarity
Hmm.
first. And some people say his mouthpieces play bright, but what I've learned over the years is that what dictates often how bright or dark a setup will be is the facial structure of the musician.
Right.
So I can't remember which book it is, but it talks about like the shape of the front of your face, and if
Hmm.
the front of your face is rather flat, it'll make a dark sound. Whereas the more your face points, the brighter the sound gets
Right.
because it bottlenecks the air.
Right. Interesting. Maybe is that Liebman book? I haven't read his thing, but
I've
he goes
never,
into it.
yeah, so I've never read anything by Dave Liebman, so I don't know.
Right.
But I can't imagine there's only one person in the world who's figured this out, right? So maybe that's in the
Yeah.
book, maybe that's in his stuff too. I know for me, like we grew up in DC. By comparison, in the 80s and 90s, it was a very Afrocentric kind of place and time to be. And so they would often talk about like, so I remember one time I asked, and this is a roundabout way to get to it, but I said, why are lead trumpet players often white? And my teacher said, first of all, that's not true. They are often white, but they're not lead because they're white. He said, check this out. We have big lips, and that in terms of contact, it mutes more vibrations. So when you hear Hank Mobley, when you see him playing on a link or whatever, chances are he's muting the mouthpiece more than if Stan Getz is playing the same setup. Now, the thing with Stan Getz is Stan Getz would roll a lot. He would put a lot of mouthpiece on a lot of his face on the mouthpiece. Michael Brecker put very little of his face on the. That's why Michael Brecker's sound is bright, because he's not muting the mouthpiece very much.
Yeah.
And so he was like, there's plenty of black lead players and plenty of people that, how we arrive at a sound is a collection of factors. But he was just saying like, the more contact you make with the setup, the more you mute it. And so you balance out what the nature of the equipment with how you play on it. And for me, like, I tend to mute the setup a lot.
Right.
So I play what others might view as a very bright, loud setup. But for me, it hits a certain spot.
Right.
And it works.
That's heavy, yeah, because you don't really have. I wouldn't say you have a bright sound.
I don't think so either. But for me, see, I'm also hearing impaired. I wear a hearing aid, and so often I'm trying to go for a setup that I can hear. So that, because if otherwise I find myself straining to hear myself,
right,
even when I'm alone. So I go for a setup that I can hear, and that allows me to relax into whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah. Wow, man. Man, so much great information here.
Oh, thank you.
So you said you're on the way when you got that DV. You were on the way to a gig with Roy. Is that Roy Hargrove?
Yeah, Roy Hargrove. Nice. Yeah, we were playing an organ quintet at the Jazz Gallery.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah. So next question is, what was your most favorite gig you've ever played, and why does it stand out in your memory? And this could be like connected to, were you generating that transformative vibe, or it could be the players that you're with, or the venue, or just something. What stands out to you the most?
I've been blessed because I've had so many of those experiences. I mean, that weekend with the Roy Hargrove Quintet, man, if I ever had a moment where I felt like I'm here now, like I'm, now I was getting beat up. Okay.
Sure.
Like, for real. Okay. I was getting beat up all night, both nights, no mercy, very little instruction. Very little explicit instruction. You know what I'm saying? Lots of education, but man, that was one of them. One of the first gigs that really made me want to do this was seeing the Mingus Big Band at the Kennedy Center in 1999. And, Ronnie Kubrick stood up at the end and he played Mona, and I was like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. And then, man, I've had so many, like, experiences that, I mean, I've had at least one, what for me is a transcendental experience every 6 months.
I love that, man.
And that's in the company of lots and lots of good gigs, right? I got to a point where I realized I had done so much that I didn't have to fill my life with all these gigs just so I could stay working, right?
Hmm.
Like, and so stuff started to, you know, tension would arise with different band leaders, and um, and so I would say, you know what, okay, this is over, that's over, and stuff just got a lot more uh edifying for me. Um,
Yeah,
but man, let me tell you something. I played what was it? Three, 4 weeks ago at Cellar Dog with Lonnie Plaxico on bass and Willie Jones on drums and Lafayette Harris on piano. And I was like, oh,
that's that's a band. Hell yeah.
and I'm in a phase right now where, like, okay, we have just gotten out of the phase of being the youngest guy on the gig, right? Like, we're
Hmm.
definitely not that anymore.
Nope.
Okay. Definitely not that anymore. And for me to more fully embody the role that I find myself in, which as often as not is educational, I need to go back to school. So I got to play with folks that can teach me something. I
Hmm.
got to play with people that definitely know more than me in all the ways.
Right.
And so, because I've had a lot of beautiful experiences playing with my peers, um, but I got to go back to being a student right now.
Yeah, and man, it's so it's so interesting how that could happen on both sides of the coin. Like you can still be a student and be older than the cats in the
Yeah,
band
yeah, yeah,
too,
yeah,
and that's why
yeah.
Miles was hiring like
Sure.
Herbie,
Yep,
Tony,
yep, yep.
and all
Kenny
those.
Garrett.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for
And
sure.
yeah, as we're getting older, like that totally makes sense to me too, because you don't want to be the guy pulling the cart the whole time. It's not a good
Exactly.
feeling, and it's not, you know, it's and people that are stimulating each other, like and to
Yeah,
have that good
yeah,
vibe.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think it's a good muscle to have when you got to put the whole thing on your back and carry it,
Hmm.
right? That's a
Yeah,
good muscle to have. But if you're ever only in that role, that can leave other muscles underdeveloped.
right.
So I'm right now I'm very intentional about playing with folks that have more experience, that know more music, that have played with more people for longer than I have.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And you probably noticed, like you kind of alluded to it, but the frequency of those surreal moments on the bandstand increase as you're
Yeah,
looking for that more and
yeah,
more.
yeah,
Like yeah.
exactly. As they say, uh, I'm not. I won't quote it, but something about your desire, like when your desires are pure, the universe conspires to those ends.
Hmm.
So, so as long as you get to work, everything else gets to work too.
It's a
Things
great thing.
organized to a particular goal.
Amazing. And yeah, the last question, totally unrelated again,
All good, all
is
good.
what other instruments do you play, and how do they help you play the saxophone better?
So I was blessed in that over the pandemic, I was given a Fender Rhodes.
Ooh, nice.
And based on that donation, I had it restored. Manuel Valera restored it for me. He's great at these things, and that is sort of the beating heart of my workstation now.
Hmm.
I'm not a
Nice.
I'm not a very good keyboard player at all, but the
Hmm.
sound of the Fender Rhodes is central to the way I hear music.
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to sit down at it every day is just thoroughly just comforting to hear the sound that I hear. Like, okay, I'm here. Like, I don't have to look for it. I don't have to manipulate. I don't have to do anything. Just the amp is on, and I sit down at it.
Nice.
I got a B3 upstairs. That's another one. In terms of other instruments I play, I mean, I can play flute and clarinet and piccolo and bass clarinet and the stuff that we're expected to do.
Right.
I don't consider myself terribly fluent in those. See, one of the issues with playing the saxophone professionally
Mm-hmm.
that's different than playing trumpet or trombone or whatever professionally is that people expect you to be a professional at everything you do.
Yep.
And that's, like, okay, I've played with the Ellington band a lot over the years. You get up and you play Sophisticated Lady on the baritone. The issue is that they want you to be that good at the clarinet during rocking and rhythm.
Yeah. Yep.
And clarinet and saxophone are not similar enough for that expectation to really hold water. But that's
Yeah.
the gig, right?
Right.
So over the pandemic, I've been, as we might say, shedding my doubles. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, I got some pretty heavy feelings about that expectation. You know,
Yeah. It's not fair. I
not
mean,
fair at all.
a lot of times when you compare it to the expectations of other
Yeah,
instruments, for sure,
yeah,
there's definitely a lot of pressure there. But
yeah. I mean, and the idea is like you wouldn't even ask a piano player how well they play organ
hmm.
because they're not the same, and they're more similar than saxophone and clarinet or flute.
Right.
You wouldn't even ask a professional flute player how well they play saxophone. It don't have to be your whole life. You can just decide for a while. Like Craig Handy, because I talked to him. He's a great flute player, and he told me he became one because he had the opportunity to play with Herbie Hancock. And
Mm,
he
right.
said as he had this opportunity, but it came with the stipulation that he had to do it on flute in addition to I think tenor and bass clarinet because it was like Benny Maupin and certain others who had done that before.
Hmm.
Um, he said, so I put myself through just, without going to an institution. He put himself through an undergraduate flute degree.
Yeah.
He said, and so you spend the years, making that investment in yourself, and then it's always there. And so
Right.
that's been something that I've had in my mind. I haven't really had time to quite do that yet, but I'm headed there.
And that makes sense for you to have piano as such a heavy influence in your life, just being an arranger
Yeah,
and
yeah,
writing the things that you write and stuff.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
such a beautiful thing to have that.
yeah. Also, piano for me is a cultural thing that, like, in African American households, one of the things that indicates that that's a home is a
Mm,
piano somewhere in the house. Even
nice.
if nobody plays it, there's got to be a piano there. Yeah. Most of my life, I mean, I can think of about 6 months. I'll be 40 on my next birthday. I can think of about 6 months where I've lived in a house or anywhere that didn't have some kind of piano.
It's a requirement to have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if I was like a rock star, that would be in the writer. Like
Right.
I need a Wurlitzer at the foot of my bed. You know what I mean? I need a Fender Rhodes in the dressing room. I need something like that somewhere.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Jason, man, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time and answering these questions so
Yeah.
candidly and beautifully, man. Just
Thank you.
great stuff here.